Lacey Everett here with Minds in Motion. Today's guest is Grant Langston. If this video impacts you, send it to others because if it impacts you, it's most likely going to impact a lot of other people. Forget to subscribe to the Minds in Motion YouTube channel so I can continue making more of these videos for you and we can continue growing our Minds in Motion community. We are also on Instagram at Minds in Motion, TikTok now at Minds in Motion, Facebook, and Spotify at Minds in Motion. Today's guest is Grant Langston, who is a South African professional motocross racer. Grant competed in the AMA Motocross Championships and the Motocross World Championships. Grant was the 2000 125cc Motocross World Champion. He was the AMA 450 MX National Champion in 2007. And he was the AMA 450 MX National Champion in 2007, along with many other championship titles. Grant is going to give us the most wonderful, important tips and tricks for motocross, dirt bike riders, and he's going to teach us life lessons that he's learned from his really unique experience that he's had. Talk about resilience, mental toughness, how to stay motivated, discuss injuries, because we know as an athlete that's sometimes part of it. And Grant really normalizes that and tells us the very unique experiences that he's gone through with his injuries. This is definitely someone that you want to learn from. So let's go meet Grant. Grant.
How you doing, Lacey?
Hello, I'm good. I am so grateful we get to talk to you today. And I love your background, all of these trophies, accomplishments.
Yeah, well, this is my office. I had trophies all over the place, from the garage to sheds to everything. So I thought, when I get my office built out, I'll put at least the important trophies in there. So at least it's somewhere to display. But yeah, I guess it does create a nice background.
Yes, and it gives somewhere for you to remember all of these wonderful memories of all your hard work.
Definitely. I mean, it's funny when I see trophies from the 90s, and I even somewhere in you have my first trophy from 1988 when I started racing, and all the way up until when I retired. So yeah, it does. Every now and then you have a look, and then each trophy, when you read the label, it brings back those memories of that event or being in that country or whatever it may be.
Yes. And what got you into racing, Grant?
Actually, my dad used to race kind of more for fun. So I think just at a young age, I was sort of exposed to it. And, because a lot of my dad's friends were also riders and racers. So I think for some people, once they get motor racing in their blood, they can't get rid of it. And so, like I said, I was just exposed to it. And then one of my dad's friends had a mini bike for his son, but his son actually had a crash and was too scared to ride it. So I begged to have a chance to ride. I rode it, and the rest was history. I basically wouldn't get off it. I kind of forced my dad to buy it off him, so I had a bike to ride. And then it just escalated from there. And my mom thought I'd grow out of it. She thought it was a phase. And here we are all these years later, and my mom works at a dealership which sells motorcycles, so she's never been able to get away from them.
It's hilarious. Like you said, once it's in your blood, it's in there.
Yeah.
Once a racer, always a racer. I can
Yeah.
even kind of relate to that a little bit. I mean, I'm not a pro by any means like you, but when I was in third grade, my dad was into that, and he taught all of us, and it instilled great life lessons in us, because we crash or fall, and he's like, all right, get back on, get back on the horse.
Yeah.
And it taught a lot of resilience. But yeah, now I'm here 27 and still want to go once in a while. It like never goes away.
I'm in the same boat.
Nice. And I love how you say, and the rest is history, like a billion trophies later.
Yeah, well, it pretty much escalated from there. It was started off as something just fun as a hobby that I think, I don't think my parents really thought that far out. It was just, they knew I enjoyed it. And then I think the minute I started winning, that almost started becoming a little addictive. And so it just seemed to motivate to go to the next race and move up from intermediate to expert, and then on a bigger bike, and then same thing. So it was always goal orientated. And it's hard to explain, but everyone would love to be good at something. And for me, it was motocross. So going to the races, feeling like I was the best guy and the guy to beat, there was something that motivated me to stay in that position and always elevate my game. And then, once I got to the point where I was by, age 15, I was the most dominant guy in South Africa. And then that's when my dad and I decided to take on the world and went to Europe to do the Grand Prix. And then after I won the world championship, my dream was always to come to America and race. Yeah, I just always loved America. The lifestyle, the racing scene was big. Supercross is huge over here. Big crowds, big sponsors, big stadiums, and that led me here. And so through racing, I've been able to travel the world, see many different things, different places, experience different cultures. But what's funny is when guys put their helmets on, doesn't matter which country they're from, we all seem like we're the same. It's like motor racing, it's like a universal language. So, whether it was Europe, South America, North America, Africa, Australia, no matter where I was able to race, it was just cool to meet all those people, but have the same sort of outlook on life. And I think a lot of that came through racing.
Oh, that is wonderful. It sounds like it was a really nice camaraderie and you all were in it together. You all had the same commonalities. And
Absolutely.
therefore, it was like, that's it. Once you put the helmet on, you're one of us, you
Exactly.
know?
And
Yeah.
and again, when you put that helmet on, all the prep work and the mechanic working on your bike and the team and whatever, that all goes away. You put the helmet on, it's all about you and keeping it together in here. And that was something too about racing that I always enjoyed. Like, in a team sport, if you got a couple of guys having an off day, it could cause you to lose or the whole team. In motocross, it really is an individual sport. So you have to learn to take accountability, um, acknowledge your mistakes, but without the tribulations, it just makes winning that much more enjoyable because of all those things you had to go through and sacrifice.
That makes sense. You work so hard. And like you said, the mechanics, the trainings, my
Yeah.
gosh, I can't even imagine. And to win, Grant, all these different times and go to all these different, experience all these different cultures, countries, that sounds like an education in itself. Sports are like an education in itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I used, I've always joked, I didn't exactly go the academic route, but I went to the school of life, which was all of that, but I
Yeah,
learned
I
I
love
learned
it.
a lot of life lessons from traveling the world, and it's given me it gave me a great lifestyle. Motocross can be an expensive hobby, but if you get to that elite level, like a lot of sports, there is money to be made. So I'm so thankful, one, to have the opportunity to have come to America, but two, to have made a great living. And now I'm able to move on to another chapter, which is business and family and all that stuff. But none of that, I literally wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if it wasn't for racing.
No. Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah,
That's really profound. And two, I wanted to ask you when you said earlier, you have to, it is a very individualistic sport. It's very on you and you have to hold yourself accountable. One, that's really hard for a lot of people. It's so much easier to blame other things when you're
sure.
feeling upset, so much easier. But to have that strength to be accountable, it sounds like that just makes you improve even more.
Well, I think it's not even just, you know, it's not even about just racing, but I think it's helped with great life lessons. One thing that I really think racing helped is I don't get intimidated easily, whether it's making a business decision or a family decision or anything like that, as well as it teaches you how to control your emotions. Because in racing you can have the high of highs and the low of lows. Injuries, being in hospital, getting knocked out. There are those things that can affect you, but I really felt like it's also set me up beyond just the racing and the professional sports side, but the rest of life. For me, I've had some people say, man, like you're brave, like you're a risk taker. And I go, well, it's sort of in my DNA. I was sort of born and bred that way. So there's pros and cons to anything. Being, sometimes I think maybe it's not a bad thing to have a little bit of fear, but I've always just believed in myself, and I think again a lot of that comes from racing and progressing, because there were many times where I didn't know if I believed in myself or if I believed I was good enough to be the best. But I also believe that if you work really, really hard, there's a saying in racing too, the harder you train, the luckier you get. And I think that also goes on in life. And so everything that I've done, I don't really do anything half-hearted. I'm either all in or I just don't even go down that road.
Yes, because it's like, why do it at all if you're not going to do it full out?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. I have no moderation. It's all in. It's all or nothing.
All or nothing. You are in those moments because it is really common for any athlete to feel like to feel down or to feel like they want to quit or to second guess themselves at some point in their career. It's so common. So I'm curious what helped you get out of that.
Um, I think the fear of failing was more than anything else. And plus, part of it too is there was the added pressure that I had sort of uprooted my family to follow my dream, because when I went to Europe, I was still a minor. So my dad had to come over in the beginning, and then my mom came later on. But it definitely put a little strain on the family, both emotionally and financially. And I think there was a part of me that never want, that they took the risk on me. I didn't want to ever feel like I failed them. And some people say, well, you wouldn't have failed them, but I didn't I didn't want, in other words, we didn't really have a plan B. It was plan A was to go and succeed, and there was no plan B. So there were definitely some tough times. There was a brief period in Europe in the beginning when we were, the culture was different. It was cold. It was always raining. I was terrible as a mud rider. We were broke. We didn't know anyone, didn't have friends. That I wanted to quit. And my dad said, we've come this far. We're at a tipping point. This is going to be a breakthrough year where you go from being an unknown rider in Europe to one of the household names. So I think the fact that I didn't want to fail and literally gave it everything, and I think a lot of times in life you see that when things get tough, people want to throw in the towel. And a saying my dad always had that I love and I live by, which is, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Things I was always known as was a tough rider. I rode through injuries. I got the nickname the Zulu Warrior, being from South Africa, but because
Oh,
people used
that's
to say,
funny.
people used to say he's like a warrior. He's just a tough guy. Like, even if he's down, don't count him out. So maybe where I lacked a little bit of natural talent, I made up in just sheer determination.
Sheer determination, to say the least, man. And it sounds like too, you had mental toughness also, to
Yeah,
say the least, like a lot of just mental tenacity, mental toughness, not only physical, but you really had your mindset of like, okay, this is what I want to do. That's it. There's no backup
yeah,
plan. That's what I'm doing. So I'm going to do
yeah.
it until I actually do it.
Some of that I think was just being young, dumb, and full of myself, thinking that I could take on the world. Then when I got there, like I said, there was a period where I genuinely thought I wasn't good enough. I wasn't cut out for this. But a part of it is, some people used to think my dad was too tough on me. And he was tough. I would sometimes win a race and everyone's high-fiving me, and he would just come in and just rip me a new one, because he knew that even though I won, I was better than the performance that I showed. And he used to get mad. He used to say to me, you always do just enough to win, and one day it's going to hurt you. So he always pushed me. And there was maybe a brief time where I thought maybe he was a little bit too tough. But I look back now, and it's funny because now we're business partners and friends, but we've done everything together. And now I laugh because I see him with my kids, and he's so soft. He's such a pushover. He's a typical grandfather, and I'm like, he was hard on me, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. I think he helped mold me, one as a racer, but two as a human being. And the pressure that he put on me, I also then put pressure on myself. But what I liked about it was when championships came down to, say, me and another guy or two other guys, I always felt like they crumbled under the pressure, whereas I excelled. Anytime, the pressure was really on with, like I said, for a championship or a big win, 9 times out of 10, I rose to the occasion, and I felt like other guys sort of crumbled with the pressure. So, maybe that toughness and the way I had to go through the steps, moving around the world to get to the top level, I think it made me be able to handle pressure. And I think that's something that people don't think can be taught, but I personally think it can be, because if you live your career under constant pressure, when there really is pressure, it doesn't seem any different. So yeah, so for me, I actually really enjoyed the pressure situation, because I know it probably sounds a little bit mean, but I enjoyed watching my competition crumble. And and I knew that would happen. So I came in sort of, even like, I feel like when the pressure was on, mentally I was here and they were just trying to hold it together.
Wow.
1 or 2 times it didn't work out. It was a great learning experience too, because in racing, they say in life you live and learn. In racing, you either win or you're learning, as I say, because you either crashed or weren't fast enough or made mistakes. But again, you're always learning.
If you lose, it's a great experience to take from.
Not at the time, but when the dust settles, to me, I believe everything in life happens for a reason. And if everything went smoothly and easily in life, which it can't always do that, you'll never be prepared for when things take a turn. Healthy body, healthy mind.
Yes, they're intertwined.
Yeah.
Inverse relationship between the two, mind body connection. Totally agree. And it sounds like you definitely use the two to help you succeed. And two, it sounds like there's a huge importance in teaching athletes to prepare yourself to the fullest. So then when you're in that really high pressure situation like you were, it feels easy, or it
Yeah.
feels like, oh, I know this, and it sounds like to practice like how you want to perform.
Yeah. Well, one thing I learned through racing is everyone has goals and they strive and they all that. So you're always trying to set yourself up for success. But something that doesn't ever get talked about is preparing for failure, because it does happen. And when some people don't expect it or get a little bit blindsided, it can really affect them. I mean, I've seen some guys have a bad season or a bad race, and it affected them so bad that they almost never recovered, a year later, 2 years later. And that was something that I had to learn as well. When I had my first major injury, I had a really bad femur break. And at one point they wanted to amputate my leg because they said it wasn't repairable. But after 3 surgeries and a bone graft, they said I'd be lucky to walk again. And then after that injury, I went on to have all my success, become a world and national champion over here. So again, that was a hurdle that was put in front of me. Obviously, I was a little bit down and depressed at that time, laying in hospital, wondering what the future held. But I think I was also young enough and stubborn enough. I'm a very stubborn person, that I was like, there's no way I'm not going to ever ride again. Like, I'm going to be out there soon and winning. And the doctor told my parents, you're going to have to sit him down and have a reality check. He's a little delusional right now. And, doctor said, no riding ever again. And eventually my parents said, hey, you heard the doctor. And I was in tears. I was only 13 years old.
Oh,
And
that's so young.
they said, all right, we can go to the track and you can try it out and have some fun. And I went there and everything felt good. And I just said, I'm good. I said, the doctor doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm ready to race.
Typical 13-year-old. Love it. An athlete, that's your livelihood. That's your almost, some people contribute it to their identity. And that's like, if you're
Absolutely.
injured, you're out. We need our legs, we need our hands, we need those things because our body is part of our livelihood. And so when that's out, that's can be really detrimental to your mental health. And it's really common with a lot of athletes. I love how you had that push through mindset, Grant, of like, okay, no, I'm going to do it. And yeah, maybe you were stubborn, but it served you well in that case.
Time and place for everything, like you were saying, I was so young, I hadn't even reached the professional level. So at that point, it was just, it was a hobby, but it was a serious hobby, something I took seriously and I enjoyed. But, again, you talk about your identity, they say sometimes, whether it's athletes or races or whatever, they say you die twice. Once when you stop racing, because you lose your identity, and you wake up and you're like, who am I? And there is an adjustment period, and I've seen some guys really struggle with that, both mentally, and then I've seen guys almost go into depression, and it leads to obviously bad things where unfortunately with injuries in our sport, I've seen guys get hooked on painkillers that didn't set out to do that, but they were down, they were depressed, and next thing you know, I've had people come to me like, hey Grant, I have a problem, like what do I do? How did you handle it? And I said, no, it's easy to happen. Or maybe they get into drinking a lot. And I was a little bit guilty of that for a while when I was trying to find myself. I ended up having my career cut a little bit short. I had a cancerous tumor in my left eye that led to radiation treatment, but it affected my vision. So I had to retire, and I wasn't ready for it. So it caught me a bit of a blindside. I was very healthy, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait, cancer? And they said, yeah, this is a serious deal. Like, if you don't take care of it, it could lead to your death. I was like, wow, I didn't see that one coming. And again, I went through a period where I was probably borderline depressed, just down, feeling a little bit angry to the world. And I remember waking up and just saying, you've got a lot to be thankful for. It's all in your head. Like, change your attitude, get up, get going, and find something else that motivates you and that you enjoy. And obviously the easiest thing for me has always been racing. Racing's been my life. So I bought a motorcycle dealership that we've transformed, that was losing money after the recession in '08, bought it in '09. And even then I bought it and I said to my dad, am I that dumb or arrogant that I think I can buy a failing business and turn it around? Like, I have a lot of confidence in myself, but sometimes I'm worried I'm a little overconfident right now. And I'm proud to say that even in business, with the same kind of attitude I gave racing, which was give it everything you got, I gave it everything I had. And it's turned out that we've been successful in business as well.
Huge. That just proves we have evidence that extraordinary mindset of mental toughness and pushing through. Sorry, my cat's in the background. She's passionate about this topic, apparently.
Yeah, she's digging it.
Both of those help you in life, in work, in school. For those who are probably in school, same thing, anything that requires energy.
The mind is a really powerful thing. And I think a lot of times people forget that, and it's easy to get in a slump or a funk. It's happened to me, but I think where I feel fortunate is, even though I've been through some of those, everyone has tough times. I don't care who you are, it's tough times for everyone. And but it's how you pull out of it. And I think if you've never really had real like tough times, or lay there almost in tears, people may not really grasp the whole thing. But what I have learned, which always helps me when I if I have any issues, like say there's an issue tomorrow at work or in my personal life, I think I've almost trained myself how to overcome that. And a lot of that was from racing. You could dwell on a weekend where maybe you were leading the race and you crashed on a stupid mistake, and it'll beat you up all week. But the nice thing was there was a race the next weekend where you had to forget what happened at the last race and look forward. And how you do that is you acknowledge the mistake, you learn from it, and you move forward. And I know a lot of these things are cliche and it's easier said than done, but even when I have hurdles now, I think I'm far more confident in myself, knowing that I'll figure it out without it, really sucking the life out of me. I'm able to turn a negative into a positive pretty quickly. And I think a lot of that, like I said, started from racing, and those lessons from riding a dirt bike have come in handy in real life nowadays.
Yes, absolutely. And these things that you've learned have also translated to life, like how to run a business. You would think that's the complete opposite of dirt bike riding, but there's a lot of similarities with sports and working. And too, it sounds like going back, it is really common for, I'm actually happy you brought that up, because there's other Minds in Motion videos with athletes I've interviewed that are on the topic of making it separate from your identity, making your sport separate. Otherwise, you end up with some depression or, some anxiety or who am I, and a low sense of self, and it's so common. Everyone goes through it, even if you're like a firefighter, and you retire and you make that
Yeah,
your identity, you're going to go through some emotional things. And
yeah,
it's hard. It's kind of normalizing that every human kind of goes through that. It's almost like you're grieving, a grieving process.
yeah, absolutely. It's like that saying, as an athlete, you die twice, when you retire and your actual death. But, you know, when I talk to people that, say riders that are still racing, a lot of them will come and talk to me, maybe just for, bouncing ideas off, or maybe seeking a little bit of advice, knowing that I went through a lot of different things and retirement. And, one of the key things is I say to those guys is race, you're going to stop racing at some point. It might be sooner than you predicted or later than you predicted, maybe a bad injury. I know a friend who broke his wrist really bad and had to stop racing because he had no motion in it, and it was his throttle hand. And it was tough for him because he wasn't planning on it. He didn't have a retirement plan in place. So I often tell guys, the best thing you can do in your peak of your career is still start planning what you're going to do when you're done racing. Because if you can transition from getting off the motorcycle and maybe you go work for a company in the industry, or maybe you start a company, maybe you do motocross coaching. I think there's a variety of things where you can use your platform to still help move forward. When I stopped racing, I had a lot of requests to coach riders, and I did that for a little while, and that was enjoyable. Then I was employed as a team manager to run a race team, and that was a great learning experience. But I'll be honest, I learned one thing. I don't want to be a team manager, because you travel every weekend to the races and you work all week, so you barely see your family. You're on the road, and contrary to what they say, dealing with a group of guys is like dealing with a group of high school chicks. Like, they will whine about everything at any time. But that was a great learning experience. And then in that same year, when I thought I'm not cut out for this team manager stuff, I was offered a position to do TV commentary, and I did that for 8 years, and I just retired from that at the end of last year. So everything that I've done, I'm on TV, but it was because I was a former champion, and I think someone at NBC liked my accent, so that doesn't hurt either. Basically, because of motocross, I was able to continue on doing things in the industry: riding, coaching, managing, announcing, owning a dealership. And a lot of the people that come in the dealership are into motocross, so they know who I am. So my name has helped the dealership. So I could never really imagine doing something that didn't involve motorcycles. That would be a huge change, or that part of me would almost be a little bit scary. But the thing that is nice is I still ride for fun. My kids ride. Obviously you're aware, even at the high school, they have their little dirty wheels club for all the kids with their off-roading and side by side. And it's awesome to see, some crazy way COVID sort of revitalized motorcycle and just motorsports in general. We've seen the uptick in sales, and I love it, because all these kids are getting out, they're active. There's if you're into any sort of motor racing, those people that you're around become like your family and your best friends. So the camaraderie, just seeing all of that, it is a wonderful sport. I know some parents out there are always concerned about their little baby, getting injured. But I've often used that saying, would you rather get a phone call saying, Miss Lacey, your son broke his ankle, or hey, Miss Lacey, your son's in hospital, your son's in jail because he was dealing drugs? And a lot of times,
Right? Yeah.
motocross has kept kids away from distractions and trouble. Bones heal. Unfortunately, it is a bit of a dangerous sport at times, but there are people that do it recreationally their whole lives that have never really had more than a bump and a bruise. So I always say, I'd rather take that option than than not knowing what your kids are up to. I think it keeps them out of trouble, keeps them healthy. I've never met a kid that rides dirt bikes that has depression or issues. Whereas I see some of these other kids, they're sitting on social media and they're getting upset because someone said something negative. So it is an interesting world, but again, motorcycling has provided a platform and a lifestyle for me that I never even thought about it when I was a kid. I just, since I was a little kid, my goal was just to be the best rider in the world. I always said, I think there was a mom that reminded me that after my first win in like 1989, I think I was just 6 years old or 7 years old, and I'm on the podium. They're like, "What do you want to do? What do you want to be when you're older?" And I said, "A world champion." And parents were like, "Oh, oh, that's so cute," and all that. They thought it was cute, but I was adamant on it. So, but I didn't think, oh, well, maybe when I'm done, I'll own a dealership or do TV. No, it was just, I just wanted to go racing. So I'm fortunate to have stumbled into the other positives that came along with the sport.
Yes, and it's a great lesson too, Grant. It sounds like you're still in your field, right? Like you're still in your
Yeah.
field, and there's so many opportunities in any field, football, dance, whatever it is. You can become a commentator, you can become a coach, you can do a plethora of things
Yeah.
when you're done, when you're retired, right? And
Yeah.
it's funny, I kind of did that same thing when I was in middle school. I was like 13 probably, like you were, and it's like the end of the year, you're like in eighth grade, you're leaving. They're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like everyone's like a doctor, a dentist, like a
Yeah.
fireman. And I'm like a Laker girl. And people are like, oh, that's so cute. Like, oh no, but then you do it. And
There's that old saying, something makes everyone tick. And
yeah,
it's not the same thing for everyone. There's some people that, when they hear my story, they kind of go, they ask things like, well, did you think about retirement? Did you have a financial plan in place? I'm like, all I thought about was the next race, if I'm being perfectly honest. And so there's some people that go, I couldn't imagine living that lifestyle of just, not a lot of planning except to go from one race to the next and chase your dream. But as you get older, you do think about those things more. But that's the old reason. And they say, when you're young, do what you want to do. If you want to be a Laker girl, go do it. Because guess what? When you're 40 years old, they're not hiring you as a Laker girl. Your expiration date's come and gone. So make hay while the sun shines.
yes, make hay while the sun shines. I love that. I love these quotes from Grant you're spitting out. They're awesome. That is so true, because a dancer's body isn't going to last forever. An athlete's body isn't going to last forever
No,
either. You got to do it
exactly.
while you want.
Yeah,
And like, it's just like that, just choosing happiness. Like what makes you happy, just do it. Do it now before you can't anymore.
exactly. 100%.
Yes. Oh, wow. Well, this was really wonderful, Grant. Thank you so much.
No problem. Anytime.
Serious words of wisdom.
One thing I would suggest to anyone is don't be afraid to ask questions, especially from people that have been successful or doing something that you would like to know more about or get involved. Sometimes I feel like people are a little afraid to ask because they don't want to feel like they're coming across as dumb or uneducated. But I spent my life asking people that I respected their opinions. And it doesn't mean if someone tells you something, you have to listen to it, but ask 5 people the same question. And then usually you can read between the lines and come up with your own outlook on that. And then you can feel confident in making your own decision. But
I think that's wonderful too, because I think it would help you learn who you are. Like
absolutely,
otherwise you just don't have other people's expertise. It's kind of like look to those who came before you, take what they give you and make it your own. And
overconfident person. But as long as you're aware of what your personality is, you can always, kind of counterbalance that. If you're nervous, there's ways to work at that. Being overconfident can be good, but it can be a bad thing too. So again, just the more you know about yourself, the easier it is to then adjust and make changes if necessary.
yes, self-awareness. It
Yeah.
it actually reminds me, my own dad taught me when I was in third grade, first learning how to dirt bike ride. He taught me, speaking of life lessons with dirt bike riding, he taught me like always be aware, you know, like when you're riding, always be aware. Your little thing out there in the desert, people can come this way, you know, people you can't really control that. And so he's like, always be aware. And he always taught me like look ahead. He'd always be like going like this. And now to this day we always go, he'll be like, hey Lacey, he'll be like, do this. I'm
Yep.
like, love you, Dad. But yeah, it's like teaching you look ahead, even if it's like in school, look ahead to what assignments are due next, or look ahead for your future. Be aware of your surroundings.
Well, you know, you could talk about it two ways. When with riding or motocross, or like you said, being out in the desert, it's a natural tendency for people to look at the ground in front of them because they want to see if there's any rocks or stones. Problem is, when you stare at the ground in front of you, everything's coming at you so fast. When you look ahead, it comes at you a lot slower because you're looking far down the track. But I think the same applies in life. If you're looking straight in front of you, you're not going to see what's down the road. So the further out you can look, then everything comes at you at a slower pace, and it doesn't seem overwhelming either.
Thank you, Grant.
Anytime. Take care.